Hey there, and welcome back to another guide video for Monster Train: The Last Divinity. It's been a while since I've made one of these, but I keep getting asked about this topic in all of my YouTube comments for almost every run that I put out. And I feel that while I talk about it a little bit in every run that I record, I typically gloss over a lot of the key details in order to save time. It's something that I can evaluate quickly. I maybe mention a few key points and then we move on with the run. It's also not very entertaining to watch me talk about the map, but I wanted to take this time to try to put together a video that explained my entire thought process on the strategic layer of Monster Train. And I think that the node generation and the map and all of those details are very important for how your run is going to play. You might have two identical starts with identical clan combos, and because of node generations and some other factors, of course, the run will look considerably more different. And there are other layers, other elements to the strategic layer as well, things like your card drafts, your rewards. There's a lot of what you get out of your relics, and there's a lot that goes into it. We're not going to touch on everything. This is going to be focused on the map elements. And there's a lot to say, honestly. I feel like I could talk about this for a while, so I don't want to delay. So as always, do like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And let's begin. We're going to talk about this. So you may wonder why I'm in the daily challenge, and I've decided to go in the daily challenge to showcase this. I wanted to have a node generation that I could simply play, and I'm not going to do a run here, but that I could walk through with you with some examples so I can snap click around and kind of give you some sense for what's going on. This is also pretty low stakes for me because normally I wouldn't be playing a normal run unless I were recording it, so this is kind of a special case. I will actually play this run afterwards for a later episode. So if you are interested in seeing how I play this, I will attempt to play it as if it were Covenant 25. It's not, I mean, it's a daily. But at a minimum, it means that you'll be able to kind of see how I actually use the things I talk about here in the same run where I talk about it. So that's why we're here. Ignore all of the other things, it doesn't really matter. But let's talk first, before I get too far ahead of myself, why does this matter? Why would I make a video for this? Why do these node generations matter? Well, first, let me actually mention, I say node generation, and that's because everything here is a node on a path. These nodes, whether it be this Herschel's Horde, this Pyre Remains, whatever, these are nodes that you can think about. They're parts along your journey. And some of those nodes are combats, they're forced nodes. So it's just a terminology I use. I feel like it's been kind of well adopted by the community, so that's what I'm calling it. And of course, the seed for the run, the thing that makes the daily challenge possible or run sharing possible, means that you'll always see the same node generations for the same seed. This is important. It means everyone's playing the same thing. So that's why node generation is a topic that I bring up. It's also important because some node generations are strong, some node generations are weak. We'll cover this in a bit. I'm not going to touch on that up front, but it's important to realize that some of these things are much more powerful than others for your run, on average. Of course, a lot of this is statistical, because you're not guaranteed to see good things. In fact, you might see a bunch of bad things, but you really do need to plan around the average, I would say. Typically, you might see a bunch of dirt, but you'll see one or two really good things that you can build around, and you want to just identify those and pick them. So there's that. The most important thing here is that this informs most of the decisions that you make throughout your run. And that may seem crazy. I mean, if you're going to play Monster Train, you could just turn this on, ignore this fully, and completely YOLO down the line. I actually do that on mobile sometimes with Covenant 25. My win rate suffers on mobile as a result, unsurprisingly, because I'm not evaluating all of the possible decisions ahead of time. You have a wealth of information that you can take advantage of. You should do that, right? If you want to win every run, do that. Certainly if you're playing hyper casual and you just want to see what the heck Monster Train's got for you today, you can do that, and it doesn't really matter all that much. Cool. So there's that. But this also tells you what lines are available to me, right? So this is coupled with my opener. So I have an opener available to me. And then the question becomes, well, okay, with that in mind, what can I do? So an example here, I am Primordium. I have opening perils, okay? I have some buffs and I have restores. Whatever, fine. So some details here. The most important ones to me here, and some of this comes with practice. I'm not going to tell you about why cards are good or whatever in this episode, so don't worry too much about that. Take my word that Primordium is strong, Perils of Production is great, and that this is an excellent opener to have. You feel really good when you have this. So, some takeaways that I will mention up front. Perils of Production is a key holdover target, so maybe you want to look for that. This makes your magic shops much stronger. Or, Primordium in general wants to feed into something from the other clan. Umbra units are very weak in this setup, so you're looking for Awoken units. So that may inform the lines available to you. You see down here you have a steel shop with a unit banner that's an Awoken banner. Cool, that's pretty good for you, right? But if you see a good unit draft from this battle, you might consider seriously going to this magic shop instead, because a holdover would be potentially immediately game winning on ring 2. So those are very important elements to be keeping in mind. It also will matter what Primordium I get, right? So a lot of this is not deterministic in the sense that if you think ahead about the options available to you, you're not going to go, okay, if X, then Y, then Z. You're not going to plot it out quite like that. The better way of thinking about it is from the perspective of what's available. What is even available to you as an option? Because depending on your node generation, you may not even have the option there, and you may be thinking about alternatives. Example is if all of my banners here were Umbra banners instead, I'd be thinking, okay, I should be planning around morsels potentially, maybe looking for an alloyed construct or something. And so I'm going to be taking different card drafts because of my node generation. And I may not say that in an episode, why I am making that decision, but this is absolutely factoring into it. So it really does matter. It informs so much about your run. The other thing that I think is true generally about Monster Train is that the availability of map information is honestly, in my opinion, one of the strongest parts of the game. Everything is shown to you. With some exceptions, you don't know about your minor battle bosses. And I like that because it means that you have to answer all of them. So you need to be thinking, how do I handle Crystal Cloak? And that can be solved a lot of different ways. Or how do I handle backline sweep? Am I going to die to that? What is the strategy for me solving that if I'm playing, say, Tethys, and I have to keep her alive? Okay, well, how do I not lose the Sower of Sorrows? Etc. if I'm playing Damage Shield into Self-Made Harpy or something. There are other examples. I've talked about this in other videos. Pact Shard thresholds matter here, so maybe I'm very weak and I'm concerned about Pyrelight Master on ring 4. At 50 shards, he gets a multi-strike. I can then tailor my node generation along the way, or not the node generation, but how I'm using it, which ones I'm going to, what I'm taking when, in order to be under those thresholds, if possible. But maybe the node generation requires that I take the pack shards early. That could happen. So that's something to keep in mind. There's just a lot of things there. I'm kind of giving you a lot of upfront examples before I dig into some of the more detailed areas here. But yeah, the strategic layer is big. There's a lot here, and if you like strategy and tactics, this game's really good for it. I didn't mean this to become kind of a review video of Monster Train, but it's one of the things I really like about this compared to some other alternatives in the genre. Some of them just simply give you very little information, and as a result you go, okay, well, I guess I'm doing this and it doesn't really matter because I didn't know about this boss that was coming up in 5 areas or whatever. But, I mean, you do know which ring 3, ring 6, and ring 9 boss you're fighting. Or ring 8, I suppose. Seraph is on 8. So, you can in this particular case, we have Soulsucker Talos, which I typically call Dazed Talos. We've got Spell Shield Arcus and Sap Seraph. These have ramifications on your run. Them existing and this information up front allows you to build around it. If this were Diligent, I would play this very differently. Because I have an Opener Perils, I need to have sacrificial cards that I can use to bait out those consumes if I end up going Perils here. Alternatively, if this were Patient, I'd be thinking, how do I not die on turn 2 to Patient? That's another very important element of the run. You might be looking for Damage Shield for that, whereas something else might work entirely for Sap Seraph. A great example of this is I need to answer backlines because if a whole bunch of Shadewings walk up on me and hit me for 150 damage, my lifesteal doesn't matter, right? My guy died. So there's a lot of stuff there that you need to be thinking about. I love that. And yeah, so that's kind of the overarching why this stuff matters. It is very important for how you play your run. That's your TLDR. If you didn't feel like watching this section, that's what you get out of it. It's just important. It matters. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the various nodes available to you. This is something that I want to mention a little bit up front because what you get here, what is even option that you should consider matters, okay? So I'm going to go out of order. It's not based on what we're seeing, but I will start with the Dark Forge. It's a guaranteed node, so don't really think too hard about it. It shows up on Ring 1, Ring 4, and Ring 7 after each major boss. You upgrade your champion. Okay. It's intended to be something of a force multiplier in your run, so you're guaranteed some value after things get tougher, after the early mid-game sections, and into the early game itself as well with Ring 1. So it's fine. Don't worry too much about it. You've also got the other things, so let's kind of just pick one. All right, yeah, we'll start with Forgotten Boons. Get 75 gold. Money is generally good. I love money. You may know that about me if you've watched any of my episodes. The thing is that money is more valuable early than it is later, because early it means you can reroll shops, it means you can hunt for value before you're seeing other nodes that matter, that depend on this, right? So I consider early money very valuable. You see like this divine boons right here, which gives 100 gold because it is, a divine boon as opposed to the forgotten boons. This is incredibly valuable. I think there are so few cases where I skip this because this 100 gold completely changes your outlook on Ring 2. Now, having like double gold here, maybe I would take it on Ring 2 instead of Ring 1. You see what I'm saying? Maybe you make a different choice here. So just the fact that I'm seeing double Divine Boons here might mean that if I'm super weak here, I will probably skip, right? If I'm so flimsy that 10 shards might kill me, I can always take it on Ring 2 and feel better about it. Cool, so that's money. I want to talk about Unstable Vortices. So an Unstable Vortex is a removal. These remove 2 cards from your deck, and considering the average size of decks, typically you're adding cards early. You're looking at like 26 to 28 cards, depending on what you're drafting, what you're seeing event-wise, etc. So 2 removals cuts a lot out of your run. You always want to get rid of the chaff, the stuff that's really hard to play. I'm not going to go into the details of what you want to remove here, but it is valuable to get it. I consider this one of the craziest, strongest nodes possible, and it makes every path considerably stronger when you see a vortex on it. So, but at the same time, it's not a deciding factor usually. I'm not going to a direction because, removals. Sometimes, maybe if I'm infiniting or something, my deck needs to get down to 8 cards on a redraw or something. It can happen, but typically I'm not tunnel visioning removals because you need power, right? It can happen, though, if you get so strong early enough that you simply want to just remove all the garbage. Fair enough. So, it's strong. Another one that matters is the Herschel's Hoard. Here's one. Yeah, cool. So this is just get an artifact. I call them relics, whatever. It's all the same thing. But basically, you want to be thinking a little bit about your possible high rolls and things like that. What could I see here on the average of what the value of this is? Depends on your clans, right? So maybe for like Wormkin, this is much stronger than it is for, let me think of an example, Umbra. Most Umbra relics are not that great. They're fine. None of them are bad. Like the relic sets are all pretty good on average, but some do stand out, right? Hellhorn has a lot of high rolls. You've got Railhammer, or maybe you have extra rage damage, or some imp relic, or double summons, Ashes of the Fallen. There's a lot of things that can go crazy in Hellhorn, so it feels pretty good to go to a Horde there. This is of pick 2, so you pick 2 there, whereas the Divine Horde is pick 3. That's the big difference here. Otherwise, you get 1 relic out of it. It's fine. Next, I'm going to hit on unit banners. So you can see a couple of them here, the Umbra banner or the Awoken banner. Basically, you get a pick 2 of a unit that is a banner unit. Not going to go into what that is here, but suffice it to say there's a select list of units in each clan that qualify for a banner, which means that you have a likelihood, you're reasonably likely to see certain things, right? You can, I don't want to say you can count on it. There are enough units, 6 uncommons and 3 rares, that you're not guaranteed to see anything you're looking for, but generally speaking, 1, you need units in almost all runs, and 2, you're looking for a few good hits for your run out of whatever options are available. You've got Pyre Remains over here on the left side. I consider this the weakest node, but sometimes it's really important, right? Sometimes your run is weak and you need to just skate by. Like maybe you have all the pieces and you just need to survive ring 4 or something, right? This would be a great example of, okay, well, I'll take some health then. Sure, why not? I can league a couple guys on that and feel a little better about it. This is hard to measure on average, but typically I say that health is not that great. If you're really strong and you start snowballing, then you stop caring about your health because nothing ever walks by, and then any pyre health you pick up is fully useless, right? It doesn't make you stronger. So generally speaking, you're looking for other things, right? But yeah, it exists. It's not bad. And then you've got caverns. I guess there's the one here, so I'll show you this one. There's a guaranteed caverns on ring 3, which is nice. And then you've got others that pop up along the way on rings 5 and rings 6. Typically there are 3. I believe that none of them can spawn on ring 4 anymore, and none of them spawn in the early game otherwise. Typically you're going to see 3 in a run. 1 on ring 3, it's guaranteed, and then 1 on rings 5 and 6. Pretty typical. So, or 7, I guess. It's like you get 7, 5. I think you can't get 1 on 4 anymore. But you can get 5, 6, and 7. So typically you might, I don't know. I don't actually know the exact spawn ratios here of if you can see 4 of them. I'm pretty sure you can't. I think it's 3. They just might be spread across those 4, right? So which ones you get them on maybe changes. It might be on 5, might be on 6, might be on 7. You're going to get 2 or 3 there. I'm pretty confident. I'll admit I didn't look up any of the spawn rates for some of these. I go based on the fact that I've played maybe 2,800 hours of this game, and I think I'm pretty good at it. So as a result, there's only so many you realistically should be expecting. Cool. Beyond that, we have shops. I'm going to go into more detail about the shops on their own little section, but suffice it to say you've got a steel shop to upgrade your units, a magic shop to upgrade your spells, and a trinket shop to buy relics. These are as strong as they can be, right? A unit shop is going to be killer important if you have no upgrades, but once you're fully upgraded, you ignore them pretty much. They basically become dead weight. So your mileage may vary. It is important to know where they are. So that is kind of the next thing I'm going to talk about, which is, where are my things? And I didn't mention divine temples because they're the first one I'm going to talk about. When I start a run after analyzing my opener, the next thing I do immediately is I crack open the map on the top right of the screen and I ask, where are my temples? And this is important because you need to reach the pact shard count for what you're doing, right? This could be 100 shards if you're looking to just, divine win streak. This could be 200 shards if you're practicing kind of the higher pact shard metas, or maybe you're targeting something else. Maybe you're going crazy and you want 300 shards for a run or something. So whatever your target is, you need to know where you're getting those shards from. That's the only place you can get them, is temples, and obviously also the boons and the hordes, but at the same time, temples give you a lot. They give you 50 shards at complete value if you take everything. You get a 10, you get a 15, they're spell upgrades, and then you will also get a chance at an infusion, which is 25 for a total of 50. That's a lot of shards if you need them. Now, I always think about not just where they are, but when they are in my run. So first, early temples tend to be important. You like having one early at least so you can do an early infusion, maybe to dupe it or something. But if all of your temples are early, then that forces you to play into early pact shards, right? Which is potentially risky. Meanwhile, the number of temples you see matters, right? Because this run in particular has 5. The minimum you can see is 3. The maximum you can see is 5. And so the idea here is I would consider 3 to be a quote unquote weak spawn, a bad generation maybe, whereas 5 would be great. And the reason that matters is flexibility, right? You can decide when you have 5 temples, well, heck, if I'm only going to 100, where do I want to take these shards? I can wait until later if I feel weak. I can take them early for initial strength, and you have a lot of options there. Meanwhile, you've got other things to consider where they are matters, right? 3 temples all late, it's a little spooky, right? Because you can't get any early power, so you're just waiting. You're skating by with your unit infusion for a long period of time. A good mix is typically what I like to see. 1 early, 1 mid, typically before your ring 6 boss. So maybe my ideal temple generation would be on ring 3, and then on ring 6, and then on ring 8. You always want a ring 8 temple if possible. It just gives you all the options because there's so many things you can do on ring 8. And it's your last power up, so you can just do what you need to do, right? Meanwhile, these are really important for 200 shard runs or more because it gives you flexibility in when you take your shards. Even at that level, with 5 temples, you can kind of mix and match to your heart's content. Whereas with 3, you're taking everything at all of them, pretty much, and you're just dealing with that. So they're very important. So where you see them matters, as well as how many you see, they matter. It's the first thing I talk about when I go through, okay? I walk forward and I talk temples. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk about is where are my Hellvents. So what is a Hellvent? I didn't mention this earlier, and that's because I'm also giving it its own section, which is a duplicate. Now, a duplication, I typically call these dupes. This is one of the few true force multipliers in Monster Train, which is another way of saying I have a very strong thing. You know what's better than having one very strong thing? Having 2 very strong things, or maybe even more. So you can just duplicate your best cards. What's really happening and why it matters is if it's a unit or something that you can only play once, then it's a force multiplier when you play it. But if it's a card that you can play multiple times, it improves the draw density of powerful options to your run. And then you can answer the question, for instance, of how many turns until I see X card. Sometimes I will dupe important cards, like maybe a Stealth Tomb with Endless, so that I'm more likely to see it, even if I don't actually want to play 2 of them. The goal is to make myself less likely to lose to a bad card draw, right? It's all about statistics and draw density and things like that. Those are things that I care about a lot, and it's a trick that you need to play at. While you could sometimes maybe dupe a really strong card that, would make you score better, you should really be duping the things that prevent you from losing. My philosophy, this is mostly from wanting to win every run, but my philosophy is I want to reduce my loss chance to 0% or as close as possible. I don't want to win more. So I tend to avoid dupes that are strictly win more, and I look almost exclusively for dupes that are lose less. It's just a mentality thing. So dupes are very important. And so what happens is I go and I walk through forward and look for temples. I then walk backwards and look for my dupes. So in this case, we have a dupe on 8, a dupe on 7, and then another dupe on 4. Very normally you see 3 Hellvents. That's pretty typical. This run is no different. You have 3 Hellvents. Typically there's 1 early and then 1 late and then 1 somewhere in the middle. It can generate 4 Hellvents. It's extremely rare, but sometimes you get the crazy run that has 4. It's possible. It's not an impossibility. So as a result, keep that in mind. A 4th Hellvent might completely change the way you play your run. Whereas a 3rd one, the normal 3 might just be a normal as you expect kind of, okay, we'll plan it. Worth noting, by the way, you will always see 1 Hellvent on ring 8. It is always there, somewhere. Similarly, there is always a removals there somewhere. So There's some other specialties about Ring 8, but most of them don't matter terribly much. Like there's always money somewhere or something. You always are going to see both a magic shop and a steel shop. There's always a trinket shop in the middle, right? These are some of the standardized things. They want to give you the option at the end of your run to like cash out and power up as much as possible, which is important for the game, how you play the game. So that's a Hellvent and why that matters. Now next, I'm going to talk about where are my shops. Typically when I walk back and do Hellvents, I'm also thinking about shops. There are some nuances to shop generation that I talk about that represent good or bad node generations, but we'll talk about them in the way that I typically present it, which is backwards. As I've gone forward to talk temples, I go backwards for dupes and shops. One thing I'm always looking for is which rings have no magic or steel shops, or both potentially, because typically you're looking to buy stuff at shops. You want to turn money into value for your run. And so for instance, look at this ring 7 here, no magic shop or steel shop. That's interesting, right? That matters. So that means that basically ring 7 is going to be power up in different ways. Maybe that is a trinket shop, or maybe that is removals or a duplicate. Like you've got options here. You will get stronger. It just might not be the way you want. So typically you'll want to have your upgrades before then. Otherwise you're walking into ring 8 and praying that you're going to see what you get. Let's see, so we have like a steel shop on 6 or a magic shop on 6. This is pretty typical. They're never going to generate together. They're going to be on their own side, so you can just kind of look for them. And I keep this in mind. It's like, okay, ring 6 has options. Sure, no problem. And then ring 5 has a magic shop and a vortex, cool, and a steel shop. Cool, so we can have both of them. Ring 4, however, has no steel shop, right? But it has a magic shop. So what is this doing? Why does this matter? Think about this. There are 2 rings with no steel shops, none on 7, none on 4. This happens often. And what this means is it means that you're going to get a double spawn early. It's like a 95% certainty. Theoretically, it's not guaranteed. I have gotten some runs on the channel where it's like I got denied and then I miss also in the early game. But what it means is you see I have 2 steel shops in the early game. Usually what that means, depending on when I'm seeing these steel shops, is I want to upgrade my units early so I can get stronger early and be prepared, right? These usually can result in droughts of shops. So for instance, if I see double steels in the early game, I might not see a steel shop again until ring 6. This is the classic example of, okay, I beat Talos. How the heck do I survive to ring 6? To get my next steel shop, I didn't find any good upgrades. Usually you want to stay low on pact shards in that case in order to avoid spiking the enemies in their difficulty, otherwise you might get wrecked, right? It's easy to lose on rings 4 and 5 at 100 shards because you didn't pay attention. This is especially relevant at very high shard counts, like 200 shards. Sometimes you might not get a choice, right? It's okay, at high shards, you don't really get a choice sometimes, but you can sometimes completely kill yourself. You're walking into ring 4 with 100 shards, you're not strong enough, Pyrelight Master rolls up and does 60 damage around you, and you're just dead. Nothing can take that if you didn't answer it with daze or something else. So, things to be mindful of, where your shops are. The same rules that I just mentioned for steel shops also apply to magic shops. It's just typically they're not super critical. Some runs, yes, not all runs. Usually you want to upgrade your units, but sometimes also you can win without doing it. It happens. But if I saw 2 magic shops early, those same things might apply. I might have magic droughts, which could matter if I was, for instance, in this particular run looking to find holdover on perils, and it was super important for my endgame plan, right? That could matter. So, your shops. Those kinds of things come up. Trinket shops do not follow the same rules. Typically, you'll only see the guaranteed 1 on ring 8, but 1 can spawn elsewhere. I have also seen 2 spawn once, so I had 3 in a run. You can maybe see a lot of different trinkets when that happens. Trinket shops are not critical, but tend to be a good outlet for a lot of money. There are obviously a lot of high rolls that are potentially available there, so keep in mind, I don't normally call them out other than to note whether or not they're good, right? An extra trinket shop on ring 7 can be very nice because it means that I can cash out a little bit here, power up, or maybe I can just see more trinkets over the course of the run, which means that maybe I find that high roll, right? As opposed to potentially missing it. So, things to be mindful of. Okay, so that's where my shops are. Now let me also mention I've avoided talking about it thus far, but let's talk about powerful node combos, okay? So powerful node combos, you'll see me call out when I see them. So I typically walk forward, find my temples, ignore everything, and then walk backwards and think. Why do I do that? Doesn't really matter. You could also walk forwards. It just helps me because it means the most recent thing in my mind when I actually finish ring 1 is the stuff I'm about to walk into. It just helps me remember it. It's just mostly a mnemonic, really, when you think about it. Whether or not that's actually the right word, whatever, it's fine. It's just a helpful memory tool. Now, you could, of course, walk forward. But let's talk about the powerful ones. You knew this was coming. If you watched my videos at all, you know I talk about the removal dupe. It is fabled and it is incredible. But some of these node generations are very powerful, like the removal dupe, and you're looking to find ways to use them, right? You won't always be able to. Sometimes you have to go the other path for one reason or another, but if you can take advantage of them, heck yeah, you are going to power up in a big way. I play my entire game around the existence of Hellvents and dupes. They matter. You want to plan around duping. I take space to fit a third siren on the floor. Let me think of some other examples. I will dupe big spells. I will dupe my critical cards like an imp, for instance, where I'm getting my scaling from. Remember, I need to be killing waves by wave 3. So first wave on turn 3 is what I mean to say. So I need to go fast. So sometimes that involves duping a thing. Even if I'm only playing one, I want to find it. So I always value this. Similarly, I mentioned draw density earlier. So you add one better thing. One great thing goes into your deck. 2 bad things go away. This is a huge swing in power. It may be hard to visualize, but it's super important. Now, some runs have multiples of these. Look at this. I have a removal dupe on 8 here, a removal dupe on 7 here, and one on 4. A removal dupe on 4. This is crazy strong if I can use them, but most likely I'm going to need some of these other shops first, right? Unless I high roll all my steel shops early and I need another thing, I might not be able to use that dupe. So this can be a blessing and a curse when you see it because it means you're not seeing shops with vortices, which I also consider to be quote unquote good shops. That's the next thing I'm going to mention. You'll often hear me talk about, oh, this is a good shop. Oh, this is a bad shop. What's a good shop and a bad shop? So basically, I'm just weighing the nodes and telling you whether the net sum of that side is very strong or fairly weak. None of them are dead, because if I'm going to it, it's not going to be dead. But this is a good run for this because it demos some of the high rolls on the shop side, some of the low rolls on the shop side. Let's review ring 5 here. So on the right, we have fire remains, so some health, some money, and a steel shop. I consider this pretty weak. Usually I don't need this health, and unless I can immediately translate this money into value, it doesn't do anything for me, right? It doesn't make my run stronger in the combats, unless I can buy something. And if I'm walking into this with enough money to reroll the shop anyway, then it's pretty likely that I'm not actually going to need more cash. Maybe I do, I don't know. You might see me still do this because I desperately need a steel shop, right? So it still happens. And sometimes I desperately need the health. Maybe I'm walking by at 2 health and I know I'm going to leak something on this next floor because mathematically I expect myself to. Then, okay, well, I guess I have to take the health. Those are things to keep in mind. Meanwhile, let's look at the other side here. We have Magic Shop, removals, and a cavern for an event. This is a very high power shop. I cut some slag out of my deck. This could be some trained stewards if they're hard to play, whether it be for Ember or space reasons. Or it may be because they're units and not spells, or they're not inspired, or not, yeah, they're not infused for Wormkin, things like that. I said inspired. It's not, they don't trigger inspire triggers, but meanwhile, the caverns can potentially high roll me out of my mind. I value caverns pretty reasonably, actually. They're events. And there are only so many events that can spawn. Some of them suck, but most of them give you pure benefits. A lot of them give you just a free removal, which is great. And some of them are just outrageous high rolls. Like, here's a boss relic. You can just get a space relic from it. Or potentially, you can just get abandoned stave, and as a result, okay, well, I guess I now have 5 ember in my run, so I can just double take draw or something. There's a lot of ways that this matters. You're not guaranteed the value, because I mean, this could also just be literally nothing. There are some that are just absolute trash, but you know, some are okay and some are great. Vortexes are meanwhile very powerful. Vortices are excellent, and maybe I can use this magic shop. I consider this a great shop. I would describe this as good in my normal runs. So I would walk by ring 5 and I'd say, okay, a bad steel shop. I mention it's still a steel shop because it matters, and a really good magic shop. If I can use this magic shop here, this is a good time to take it. Meanwhile, on ring 4, we have a flip. We have a bad magic shop competing with a removal dupe. The Umbra Banner might not be a lot of value at this point, unless I desperately need maybe to high roll into a second alloyed construct or something. But at a minimum, I could dupe an alloyed construct, self-infuse it. That's important. Remove some stuff. There's a lot of power here still. Much better than this magic shop, unless, again, I desperately need this for some reason. So, good shops, bad shops, they matter. Usually you're going to see at least one good shop on ring 8 because you're guaranteed a vortex somewhere and a hellvent somewhere. Sometimes you see the fabled removal dupe plus shop. Usually, if I can use this steel shop and I can get a removal dupe, this is crazy strong. This is nuts, right? You get everything you want right there. There's also always the factor of what is in the middle when I get a good shop, right? Because if we go back up here and you have this magic shop with a horde in the middle, this doesn't usually tell you much. But a good example, I mentioned it before, a dupe with a temple in the middle means I could self-infuse here, right? That's very important. This could matter in some cases. I mentioned Alloyed Construct, a great example. It could be Titan Sentry, it could be a lot of different units. So keep that in mind. Sometimes we go dupe just to self-infuse because I haven't found a second copy of it. Okay, the last cool node generation that I really want to call attention to is one that I think doesn't get enough credit. It's called, what I like to call it, the Money Trinket Shop. I consider trinket shops to be usually pretty average. It's good to look at relics, and depending on your clan combo, they can be nuts. But money, when you have a trinket shop, means I can actually, like I mentioned before, translate this money into value immediately because trinkets are expensive. So, pretty excellent. If you see a divine boons in the middle, this is even more fabled. I love my favorite here is if you get removals and then a double money trinket shop. That is such a crazy power play. We didn't get it here, of course, right? We didn't see it. We saw part of it, right? We have the money trinket shop, but we don't have the other pieces, the removals or the money in the middle. But depending on how you see that, you're basically always one relic away from just high rolling out of your mind. And being able to do this, you're basically guaranteed value in some way. You're going to reroll and find something that will power you up. And hopefully it's enough. Usually it is, but I value those pretty highly. So those are the ones I really wanted to call attention to. Now what I want to do kind of in the last step of this episode is I wanted to kind of walk through this one. I'm going to take the moment as if I had just started this run and just looked at my starters, and we're going to talk the temple setup and everything, just so you can see kind of like an example evaluation of the node generation here. So first thing, I don't even care what's on the map. I'm just going to go into this screen right here. So let's say I'll be up here at the very top, and I'll just crack this open, and I'll go, okay, we have money at the beginning. It's good, great. Money here, so this is important because I could potentially decide when to take this money in order to get value out of the shop. I'm Primordium with Perils. Those are important details for shop selection. I want Awoken units to feed Primordium into. So, okay, Steel Shop, Awoken Banner. Great, love that for me. I'm probably going that way. Unless I get a unit draft that hits me that Awoken Banner basically already, like maybe a Sweeper or something, I might go to the Magic Shop. We'll see. Normally, I talk about this part last, because what I'm really looking for were my temples. 3, 4, good. We get some early ones, I like that. Most importantly, we get some of them before we start seeing dupes, if it matters. Then we have 6, 7, and 8. So this has 5 temples. I consider that good node generation for me. I like that a lot. A lot of flexibility in that. Hard to say what I'm going to see, but very strong. Now we walk backwards. We have the removal dupe, steel shop on 8. This is high powered. There's basically no way I don't go here. Unless I don't know, desperate for a -1 at this point, which could matter if this were like perils into diligent or something. I need to make things free, but I could also just dupe the perils or something instead. And so even if I whiff, I still have a second one. So okay, that's great. On ring 7, we have a trinket shop with money. I will call attention to this because, hey, maybe I'm rich, and this is at least something. It is competing with probably one of the strongest generations. You have a removal dupe with an event. I could see, Sunderstone here, dupe the unit with Sunderstone, and then remove some garbage from my run at the same time. Again, pretty unlikely I skip this. I will note the shop situation, no steel or magic shops here. So there's a little bit of a drought there. It's not bad though because it's ring 7, right? So hopefully I have that answered already. If I'm desperate though, it might matter. We have both shops on 6. I consider these both pretty middling shops. You've got a magic shop with money and a relic. It's pretty average, right? And then you've got a steel shop with health, but you have an event. Okay, that's pretty decent. No removals here, though, means that none of these are great shops or anything. They're just average. I have them both. It's fine. Ring 5, another example of, okay, we got both shops, but this magic shop is considerably stronger for reasons I mentioned before. The removals and the cavern versus the health and money, which is probably not going to get put to immediate value in this steel shop. But maybe I'm desperate. Maybe I really need this. I haven't seen a unit that I wanted until ring 4, and now finally I need to address this somehow. Okay. Ring 4, we have the gap, no steel shops, which means with 2 rings, no steel shops, this is usually when I predict that I'm going to get a double steel shop early. Usually I'm right. We do have a removal dupe Umbra banner. I don't care about this Umbra banner, of course, but the removal dupe is potentially good if I can use it. This would be a great place to dupe perils if I have the holdover already. Noting that I can only find that on ring 2, so maybe that influences how I play this. There is a magic shop. It's kind of garbo, but it's still something that I might go here, right? Holdover could be the play, especially if I have superfood at this point, which I will know, right? Because I have the Forge on 1 and the Forge on 4. I will see, okay, yep, double steals early, it's fine. Both Awoken banners on this side, so I'm going to one of these, most likely. These have really good infusions, they also have really good targets for Primordium. Pretty likely I'm doing both of them, honestly. Most likely I'm going both sides here. The magic shop is pretty okay, maybe I see a high roll on a unit or something, I can go look for perils real quick. The money, not as valuable here. I'm not going to be doing removals this early. Typically, I value my train stewards and things early on. But magic shops are good. 20 consumes, great for plinks, great for restores. We've got -1s, can be useful. And then maybe holdover. I'm looking for ways to improve value on shops, so maybe I see a double stack that I care about, a good double stack target somewhere, whatever. It's hard to say at this point, but I'm trying to diversify my shops is a pretty typical strategy for me. I made another video on that somewhere else, so you can learn more about diversifying your shops elsewhere. I think I talk about that a lot on the tier list where I mentioned that I think I have Titan Sentry in the top 10 for obvious reasons. But yeah, he's a great example of diversifying your shops. So anyway, and that's kind of this. And then I come back here and I think, okay, my path, early game, probably double steals. Mid game, depending on how those steel shops look, I might go look for the holdover on ring 4 on perils. Maybe I don't care at this point. Maybe I can dupe something and just get strong. Maybe I have to dupe to self-infuse. Removals, this left side is much stronger though. I will try to do this if I can. Most likely, I'm going to assume I whiff on these steel shops. You assume the worst. I'm probably having to go to the steel shop on 5, even though it sucks. At least it's there. But I'd love to go to this magic shop here. This is the one where you want to see the holdover. Cool. We have another steel or magic. You can kind of go either way depending on what you're looking for on 6, so some flexibility. Okay. And I have double removal dupes in the end, so huge power up. So this looks like pretty good node generation overall. There's a lot of good things about this. It's not perfect, but that's okay. I feel happy about this at this point. So that's what I would consider to be how I evaluate this in more detail than I usually talk about. And that's it. That is ultimately what I wanted to talk about here. I've been wanting to do this for a while, but it's hard to come up with videos like this, and then I have to plan out what I want to talk about so I don't ramble too hard. I actually have like a 2-page document that I wrote up in order to make sure that this made sense. But But yeah, so feel free to get in the comments if you have questions about why the heck some of these things are the way they are. Why do I care about them? Hopefully I've given you some context as to what about a node matters to me. And you can stay tuned for the follow-on episode to this where I actually play this run because I've opened it. I might as well play it and record it. So yeah, that's where I will leave you. This puts us at around 45 minutes. It's a bit long for a guide, but there's a lot to say here. I've told you, I gloss over it. There's a reason that I skip it quickly in the actual run, and I had so much to talk about here. But yeah, hey, thanks a lot for watching this. I really appreciate your time. As always, you can give the video a like or a dislike if you want. You can subscribe to the channel if you want to see more, and stay tuned for what's next. Take care, folks. Actually, before I even go, if you have other ideas for guides, ask me, right? Put them in the comments, let me know. I don't make them very often, but this is an example of one that I think mattered, so. Okay, cool. Now for reals though, take care, y'all.